The dust of Terminus tasted of recycled metal and synthetic air, a flavor Elias knew better than the soil of a world he had never touched. For 312 years, this hollowed-out asteroid, this tomb of a promise, had drifted through the unclaimed voids between galactic arms, a ghost ship crewed by the ghosts of a dead species. They called themselves the Remnant, the last 90,000 souls of a race the galaxy had gleefully erased. On the polished obsidian walls of the central cavern, the archives of betrayal played on a silent, endless loop cities of glass and steel turning to green-tinged dust. Fleets of allied ships from the Xylos Compact and the Lore Vassal Unity turning their plasma cannons on Earth's last orbital defenses. And the final, garbled transmission from High Command before the homeworld went silent. It was history, scripture, and poison all at once, fed to every child from the moment they could understand language. Elias was no child. At 37, he was the commander of the Nightfall Corps, the elite hunters of Terminus, and his soul had been steeped in that poison for a lifetime. He stood now on the precipice of the command spire, a jagged needle of rock and reinforced alloy that overlooked the tiered, glowing city carved into the asteroid's heart. Below, the forges glowed with the sullen red of contained stars, and the hydroponic farms cast an emerald haze that never quite reached the cavern's dark ceiling. The air hummed with the thrum of the great engines that kept their world alive and hidden, a deep, resonant heartbeat he had felt since the womb. His focus, however, was on the holographic display shimmering before him, a projection that showed a single alien vessel, a Xylan scout ship, cautiously pinging the edges of their stealth field. It had been a statistical inevitability, a stray cat wandering into a dragon's lair, but the reality of it was a cold weight in his gut. For 3 centuries, they had been a myth. Now, they were a discovery. Behind him, footsteps echoed with the heavy tread of authority. Elder Maeve, her face a road map of sorrows he could only imagine, came to stand beside him. Her eyes, the color of faded starlight, were fixed on the intruder. "It does not see us," she said, her voice a low rasp that carried the weight of her 180 years of cryopreserved life. "The field is holding, but it senses an anomaly. It will not leave." Elias didn't turn. His gaze remained locked on the scout ship, a sleek, thorn-like vessel that represented everything he was raised to despise. It's a harbinger, Maeve. It will report the anomaly, and then the Compact will send a research vessel, then a patrol, then a fleet. The whispers become a search, and the search becomes a hunt. We have trained for this day since the last of Earth's children were sealed in this rock. Maeve's sigh was thin, like the whisper of escaping atmosphere. The doctrine is clear. Vengeance is the inheritance of the last generation. But are we the last? Elias, or can we be the first of a new one if we strike? We reveal ourselves. We trade our sanctuary for a war we may not be able to win. Silence has been our greatest shield. Elias finally turned to face her, his own eyes, a sharp, cold gray, meeting hers. His face was all harsh angles and disciplined severity, a product of the rigorous gene splicing and brutal training that defined the Nightfall Corps. They were not born of love or chance, but of necessity, faster, stronger, and more resilient in zero gravity than the baseline humans who had been slaughtered so easily. Silence was a shroud. Elder, not a shield. It was the blanket they threw over our grave. What is the point of survival if we spend eternity hiding from our own murderers? The archives do not teach us to hide. They teach us that trust is a fatal flaw and mercy is a fantasy. They sent the bloom, Maeve, a plague that rewrote our own planet's atmosphere to be poison to our lungs. They didn't just kill us, they made our very home reject us. There is no peace after that. There is only a reckoning. He gestured to the shimmering display. That ship is not a threat. It's an opportunity. The first one in 300 years. Let me take it. The debate in the Elder Council chamber was a storm of quiet, desperate voices. The chamber was carved from the asteroid's core, the walls embedded with veins of raw, unrefined crystal that pulsed with the light of the power conduits beneath. 20 elders, the last survivors of the Exodus who were still lucid, sat around a circular stone table, their faces illuminated by the central hollow emitter. Elias stood in the center, a solitary figure in his matte black combat suit, a stark contrast to the flowing gray robes of the council. He had made his case a swift, surgical strike, seize the Xylan scout, scrub its logs, and use its communication array to send a message, not a threat, not a declaration of war, but something far more insidious. An echo, a ghost story made real, a rival elder, Kalen, his face scarred from one of the early cryo failures, slammed his fist on the table. Folly. You speak of vengeance when our very existence is balanced on a knife's edge. We are 90,000 souls. Elias the Xylos, compact alone numbers in the trillions across 1,000 worlds. They have forgotten us. Let them. Let us find a new home, a rogue planet in a dead system, and begin again. To send a message is to invite an armada. Elias's voice was dangerously calm. They have not forgotten. They celebrate. Liberation Day, they call it. The day the human plague was cleansed. They built monuments on the ruins of our achievements. Do you think they will just let us be? Kalen, if they find us, they will finish the job. Not out of strategy, but out of shame. To erase the evidence of their great crime, our only path forward is to remind them why they needed to betray us in the first place. We were unpredictable. We were tenacious. We were the only race that ever made them feel fear. We must make them feel it again. Fear is the only diplomacy they will understand. He looked from face to face, his gaze lingering on Maeve. Let me take my core, 5 of my best. We will take the scout ship without a single energy weapon discharge. No debris, no distress call. We will become a ghost inside their machine, and we will plant a seed of terror that will rot their precious compact from the inside out. Maeve remained silent for a long time, her fingers steepled before her lips. The other elders looked to her, their de facto leader. She had seen Earth burn with her own eyes. Her vote carried the weight of that final, fiery memory. Finally, she spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. The purpose of Terminus was twofold: to survive. Yes, but also to remember, to carry the truth of what was done to us. A truth untold is a victory for the liar. You speak of planting a seed. Elias. What seed? Elias's lips curled into a faint, predatory smile. The truth. Elder, we won't send a threat. We will send a recording. The unedited comms chatter from the Lore Vassal flagship as they opened fire on the civilian evacuation fleet over Luna. The private logs of the Xylon ambassador celebrating the success of the Bloom Plague. The data is all in the archives. For 300 years, the galaxy has been fed a lie that humanity was a violent, self-destructive race that succumbed to its own hubris. We will show them they were victims of a calculated, cold-blooded genocide. We will broadcast it on their own emergency frequencies to every colony, every outpost, every ship in this sector. We will not declare our return. We will let the galaxy's own guilt and paranoia do the work for us. Let the Xylans and the lore vassals look at each other and wonder who will be blamed. Let their alliance of convenience begin to crack under the weight of their shared sin. A murmur went through the council. It was a strategy of insidious brilliance, a psychological strike rather than a military one. It was a human strategy. Kalen fell silent, his argument about armadas suddenly seeming crude and unimaginative. Maeve looked at Elias, and for the first time, she saw not just the hardened warrior, but the sharp, strategic mind of a leader forged in the darkness of his ancestors' betrayal. She gave a single, slow nod. "You have your mission, Commander. But you will not simply take the ship. You will bring it back. We will dissect every piece of their technology. We will learn what the galaxy has become in our absence. And you will fail, Elias, with your life, before you allow them to learn of us." The ship Elias chose was the Wraith, a needle-nosed interceptor designed for silent running, its hull coated in sensor-absorbent polymers that made it a phantom even to Terminus's own advanced systems. With him were 4 others from the Nightfall Corps: Lena, his second-in-command, a silent killer whose specialty was infiltrating enemy systems; Jax, a heavy weapons expert built like a bulkhead door; Cypher, a wiry slicer who could coax secrets from any machine; and Ronan, the pilot, a man who could fly a ship through the eye of a needle in the middle of a plasma storm. They were all children of Terminus, their veins flowing with the same righteous fury. They moved as one organism, their black suits making them holes in the fabric of the hangar bay's dim light. As they boarded, Elias paused at the ramp, looking back at the vast, cavernous city. It was the only home he had ever known, a cage of metal and memory. He was not fighting for a planet he'd never seen, but for this rock, for the 90,000 souls who represented the last spark of a species that had once reached for the stars. He was fighting for the right to exist without hiding. The Wraith detached from its mooring with a whisper, sliding into the launch tube without a single vibration. It shot out into the void, a sliver of darkness against the star-dusted tapestry of space. Ronan piloted them on a long, looping trajectory, using the gravitational pull of nearby planetoids to mask their approach. The Xylan scout ship, the Stardust Drifter, hung obliviously in space, its sensors still pulsing patiently at the edge of the stealth field. It was a civilian cartography vessel, barely armed, its crew likely bored and dreaming of their next shore leave. They were about to become a footnote in a history they didn't even know was being written. "We're in their sensor shadow." Ronan's voice crackled over the private comms. "Ready for the hard part." Elias's gloved hand tightened on the grip of his mag rifle. "Cypher, you're up. Make them blind." Inside the Wraith's cockpit, Cypher's fingers danced over a holographic interface, his eyes reflecting the cascading lines of alien code. He was not just a hacker, he was an artist of intrusion. He found a subtle back door in the Scout's cartography software, a minor flaw left by a lazy programmer, and slipped inside. Looping their short-range sensor feed, he murmured, "As far as they're concerned, the last 5 minutes are going to repeat for the next 5. They won't see us coming until we're knocking on their door." Elias nodded. Jax, "Prep the breaching charge." Lena, "On me." We go in quiet. I want the crew alive, if possible. They are witnesses, not soldiers. But do not hesitate if they force your hand. The Wraith moved with predatory grace, its magnetic grappling claws extending like talons. With a barely perceptible thud, they attached to the underside of the Stardust Drifter's hull. Jax placed the thermal charge over the maintenance airlock, a silent, glowing ring of energy that would slice through the metal without a sound. Elias and Lena stood ready, their rifles pointed at the glowing circle. The ring flashed white, and a perfect circle of the hull lifted away, revealing the ship's interior corridor. A faint hiss of equalizing pressure was the only sound. They were in. The ship's interior was sterile and angular, bathed in the soft blue light favored by the Xylans. They moved through the corridors like wraiths, their boots making no sound on the deck plates. They found the first 2 crew members in the mess hall, their long, slender forms hunched over a game of chance, their chittering laughter echoing in the small room. Before they could even register the dark shapes in the doorway, they were hit with nerve stun charges, collapsing onto the floor in a twitching heap. The bridge was next. 2 more Xylans, a pilot and a comms officer, were at their stations. Lena took down the pilot with another stun charge while Elias slammed the comms officer against the console, one hand clamping over the alien's mouth, the other pressing the cold barrel of his rifle against its temple. Not a sound. Elias whispered in the harsh, guttural clicks of the Xylan trade language he had studied for years. "Your life depends on it." Terror filled the Xylan's large, multifaceted eyes. It nodded slowly. Within 10 minutes, they had secured the ship and its 4-person crew, herding them into the cargo bay. Cypher jacked directly into the ship's main computer, his mind merging with the alien machine. "I'm in," he said, his voice distant. "Their logs are mine. Their communications array is ours." Elias stood on the bridge of the captured ship, looking out at the star field through the alien viewport. For the first time, he was seeing the galaxy not from the confines of his home, but from the eyes of his enemy. He keyed the comms link back to the Wraith. "Ronin, bring us home." Gently. Then he turned to Cypher. "The archives." "Cypher, find the Luna broadcast. Find Ambassador Vor's confession. Prepare the package. It's time to remind the galaxy what a ghost looks like." Cypher's smile was a slash of white in the blue glow of the bridge. "Broadcasting on every emergency channel. Priority 1. They won't be able to shut it down. They're about to hear a message 300 years in the making." Elias looked back out at the endless night, a cold fire burning in his chest. The silence was about to be broken. The first scream would not be his people's, but the galaxy's. As it awoke from its comfortable dream to find the monster it had created was not only real, but had returned to haunt it. The first chapter of the reckoning had begun. The broadcast began not with a bang, but with a child's whimper. For a fraction of a second, across the entire trisector, every emergency channel, every fleet communication line, every public news feed was hijacked by a ghost. The audio was 312 years old, pulled from the data tombs of the archives and unleashed into a galaxy that had long since forgotten its context. It was the sound of the civilian transport ship Starlight Beacon as its life support failed under Lore Vassal plasma fire over Luna. The whimper was followed by the crackle of dying comms and a woman's voice, raw with terror, pleading for a ceasefire, naming the Allied ships that were firing on them. Then silence. The feed cut to a new file. This one visual. The opulent, floating embassy of the Xylos Compact, a week after Earth fell. The image was from a hidden security log showing the Xylan ambassador, Vor, a historical figure now revered as a unifier, raising a glass of shimmering liquid. His silken, triumphant voice filled the void. To the bloom, he toasted to his assembled staff. A master stroke of atmospheric engineering, they suffocated on their own world, their final breaths a testament to our superior vision. The human problem and its unpredictable ambition has been solved. The galaxy is secure. The feed played for precisely 2 minutes, a curated masterpiece of forgotten atrocities. It ended with a single static image, the ancient, angular sigil of the Terran High Command, an emblem not seen outside of a history museum for 3 centuries. There was no message, no threat, no demands. There was only the evidence, and then, as suddenly as it began, it was gone. The channels returned to normal, leaving a vacuum of stunned, horrified silence in its wake. On the bustling trade hub of Port Valerius, a station suspended in the neutral space between the 2 great powers, the effect was instantaneous. In the central promenade, a Xylan trade emissary, his multifaceted eyes wide with disbelief, stared at the public news screen that had just gone blank. A hulking Lore Vassal mercenary standing nearby, his stony features unreadable, slowly turned his head to look at the Xylan. The jovial, chaotic noise of the station died away, replaced by a rising tide of whispers. Species that had coexisted for centuries suddenly looked at each other with suspicion. The official story, the one taught to every child, was that humanity had been a plague, a volatile race that had self-immolated in a final, cataclysmic civil war. This ghost broadcast suggested something far darker a conspiracy, a genocide orchestrated by the very powers that now govern the galaxy. The Lore Vassal mercenary took a step towards the Xylan emissary, his hand drifting towards the pulse pistol at his hip. "Did you liars really gas them on their own world?" he growled, his voice a low rumble. The carefully constructed peace of the last 3 centuries began to fracture, not with a warship, but with a whisper from the grave. Across the sector, fleet commanders frantically tried to purge the broadcast from their ship's logs, only to find that junior officers had already copied and shared it on encrypted back channels. The truth, once unleashed, could not be contained. It was a poison, and it was already spreading through the galactic bloodstream. Aboard the Stardust Drifter, now deep within Terminus's stealth field, Elias and his team watched the ripple effects on captured galactic comms. A grim satisfaction settled over them. Cypher let out a low whistle, leaning back from his console. "It's chaos," he said, a rare note of awe in his voice. "The Xylos Compact is in full lockdown, broadcasting denials on all official channels. The Lore Vassal Unity is demanding a joint investigation, which is their way of pointing the finger. Smaller systems are panicking, wondering who to believe. We didn't just throw a rock into the pond. Elias, we dropped a mountain." Elias watched the streams of data, his face a mask of cold composure. "This is what we wanted. doubt, paranoia. Let them tear themselves apart. He turned to Ronan. Take us in. It's time to deliver our prize. The return to Terminus was unlike any arrival Elias had ever experienced. As the Wraith and the captured Stardust Drifter passed through the asteroid's great shielded aperture and into the central cavern, the entire city seemed to hold its breath. Thousands of the remnant stood on the tiered balconies and walkways, their faces upturned. It wasn't a celebration, it was something more profound, a mixture of awed terror and fierce, burning pride. They had touched the outside world, the world of their enemies, and they had returned not just alive, but with a trophy. They had proven the ghosts were real. The Elder Council convened the moment Elias stepped off the ramp, the captured Xylan crew having been placed in high-security cryostasis. This time, the mood in the chamber was electric with tension. Kalen was the first to speak, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. "You've doomed us all. You think they will simply debate this. You have kicked the hornet's nest. And now they will come looking for the ghost who sent the message. They will scour every dead system, every rogue asteroid. You have painted a target on our home." Elias stood unflinching. "We were always a target. Kalen, we were just one they had forgotten about. Now they are afraid. They are looking at each other, not for us. We have bought ourselves time. And, more importantly, we have seized the initiative. For the first time in 300 years, we are not the hunted. We are the haunt." Maeve, her ancient eyes sharp, gestured towards the holographic display showing the captured Xylan vessel now secured in the main engineering bay. "The strategic value of this act is not just in the message, Kalen. It is in what the commander has brought us. A key, a window into the galaxy that has evolved without us for 10 generations. She turned her gaze to Elias. "Report." "The Stardust Drifter is a civilian vessel," Elias began, his voice crisp and clear. "But its technology is a quantum leap beyond our own in several key areas. Their power core is more efficient. Their sensor arrays are more sensitive, and their star charts are comprehensive. Cipher is already working on decrypting their navigational database. We will soon have a map of the entire sector, including their primary military installations, trade routes, and communication relays. But the most significant discovery is what they call the Nexus." He brought up a schematic, a complex web of shimmering lines connecting star systems. It's a network of stable, artificial wormholes. Interstellar travel that used to take us months can be accomplished in days, even hours. The Compact and the Unity control this network. It's the source of their power, the backbone of their economy, and their military machine. We have been living in the dark, traveling through the back alleys while they have built a galactic superhighway. This ship, and the data within it, will allow us to understand that network, and eventually to use it. The implications silenced the chamber. To have access to the Nexus would be to move like a true phantom, to appear and disappear at will, to strike anywhere in the galaxy. The risk Elias had taken had yielded a reward beyond measure. Maeve nodded slowly, her expression grim but resolute. "Begin the dissection. I want every system analyzed, every line of code broken. We will learn their secrets, and we will turn their own weapons, their own infrastructure, against them." She looked at Elias, a new and heavy respect in her eyes. "You have started a fire, Commander. Now, you must ensure it is our enemies, and not ourselves, who are consumed by it." In the weeks that followed, Terminus was transformed. The engineering bays, once dedicated solely to maintaining the asteroid's life support and stealth systems, became a frenetic hub of reverse engineering. Under Cypher's obsessive direction, teams of engineers carefully dismantled the Stardust Drifter, peeling back its layers like a surgeon operating on an alien god. They marveled at the crystalline circuitry, the bio-neural interfaces, and the elegant simplicity of the Nexus drive. They learned that Xylan technology was based on harmonic resonance, while their own was still reliant on brute force particle acceleration. It was the difference between a scalpel and a sledgehammer. While the engineers worked, Elias and Lena used the captured data to reshape the Nightfall core. They ran simulations based on modern Xylan and Lore Vassal fleet formations and boarding tactics. Their own training, brutal as it was antiquated. They were fighting an enemy that had evolved. They needed to evolve faster. The psychological impact of the Ghost broadcast, as it was now being called on the Galactic nets, was everything Elias had hoped for. The Xylos Compact and the Lore Vassal Unity issued a joint statement condemning it as a sophisticated hoax perpetrated by anti-government terrorists. But the denial was too swift, too defensive. It convinced no one. Their alliance, built on the shared spoils of Earth's destruction, began to show deep structural cracks. Trade disputes flared up. Military patrols eyed each other with renewed suspicion in the neutral zones. The past was no longer a settled matter. It was an open wound, and Elias had just poured salt in it. Late one cycle, as Elias reviewed the latest intelligence reports in his Spartan quarters, Maeve appeared at his door. She held a small data slate. "The Galactic powers have made their move," she said, her voice heavy. "They have stopped blaming each other. For now, they have found a common enemy." She handed him the slate. On the screen was a high priority, sector-wide bounty notice. It showed the Terran sigil from the broadcast. The bounty was not for a ship or a fleet, but for the source of the Ghost broadcast. And it announced the formation of a new Joint Species Task Force to lead the hunt, the Inquisition. At its head was a name Elias did not recognize, but the title sent a chill down his spine. Grand Inquisitor Thrax of the Lore Vassal Elite Guard. His mandate, according to the official decree, was not simply to destroy the source, but to capture, dissect, and erase it, ensuring that this echo from the past could never speak again. Elias looked up from the slate, his gray eyes meeting Maeve's. The game had changed. The haunt had become the hunted once more. But this time, they were not hiding in ignorance. They had a map. They had a key. And they had a fire in their hearts that had been smoldering for 300 years. Thrax was coming. The Inquisition was coming. And Elias would be ready. The Ghost was no longer just a story. It was a target. And it was about to learn how to bite back. Grand Inquisitor Thrax was a monument carved from obsidian and patience. He stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Retribution, a vessel whose very name was a declaration of intent. Unlike the sleek, elegant ships of the Xylos Compact, the Retribution was a Lore Vassal creation of brutalist architecture, a wedge of iron-gray armor bristling with weapon emplacements designed not for diplomacy, but for dominance. The bridge was dimly lit, the only light coming from the crimson glow of tactical displays and the vast starfield visible through the forward viewport. Thrax was not watching the stars. His gaze was fixed on a holographic replay of the Ghost broadcast, which he had looped for the 73rd time. His subordinates stood at their stations in disciplined silence, afraid to interrupt his contemplation. Where others saw chaos and a historical scandal, Thrax saw a signature. He saw patterns. He was a hunter of ideas. And this ghost, this echo, had a very specific, very intelligent idea. They chose their weapons carefully. He said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that seemed to vibrate in the deck plates. The Luna recording to incite the masses and the warrior castes. Ambassador Vor's confession to sow discord between the Compact and the Unity. This was not a random data dump. This was a scalpel, used to sever the tendons of our alliance. He turned to his lead analyst, a wiry Xylan whose antenna twitched with nervous energy. The signal, you said it was untraceable. The Xylan flinched. It was. Grand Inquisitor. It was routed through a series of dormant comsats and then bounced off a pulsar's magnetic field. The signature degraded into background radiation. It's a classic phantom signal. Impossible to triangulate. Thrax walked over to the star chart, a shimmering three-dimensional map of the sector. Impossible is a challenge, not a fact. The signal had to be broadcast from a single point. It may have been masked, but its initial energy release would have left a thermal echo, however faint, a whisper in the dark. I want every deep space sensor array in this sector recalibrated. Filter out the noise of known phenomena. I want you to find me the sound of a pin dropping in a silent galaxy. Search the unclaimed territories, the graveyards of dead stars, the places where nothing is supposed to exist. Our ghost is hiding in a tomb. I want to know where. The order sent a ripple of activity through the bridge. The Inquisition was not a conventional fleet. It was the galaxy's finest bloodhounds, given unlimited resources and a singular, terrifying mandate. Thrax was not going to hunt this ghost by chasing its shadow. He was going to find its lair and burn it to the ground. Back on Terminus, the debate over their next move was fierce. The successful dissection of the Nexus drive had given them a theoretical key to the galaxy, but they had yet to use it. Cypher and his team had managed to build a prototype Nexus Calibrator, a volatile and jury-rigged device that could, in theory, allow the Wraith to tap into the network. Kalen, his face pale with anxiety, stood before the Elder Council. We have the data. We have the technology. Now is the time for caution. We must find a new world, a new hiding place in a distant arm of the galaxy, and abandon Terminus. The Inquisitor Thrax is a butcher. He will not stop until he finds this place. Elias stood opposite him, his arms crossed. And what then? Kalen, we run, we hide for another 3 centuries, and another, until our children forget the name, Earth, until we become nothing more than a band of scavengers living on a dead rock. The fire has been lit. If we run now, we prove to them that we are nothing but vermin to be exterminated. We must escalate. We must show them that this is not a single desperate act, but the beginning of a campaign. Maeve looked between the two men, her expression weary. Escalate how? Elias, a direct military strike is suicide. Elias's gaze was hard as diamond. We don't need a military strike. We need another psychological one. We need to strike at a symbol. The Xylans revere Ambassador Vor as the architect of their golden age. He is a saint to them. His body is interred in a memorial tomb on the moon of Xylos Prime, a place they consider sacred. It is one of the most heavily protected and monitored places in the Compact. A murmur of disbelief went through the council. An attack on Xylos Prime, Kalen scoffed. You are truly mad. Elias ignored him, his eyes on Maeve. We will not attack it. We will defile it. We will use the Nexus drive to bypass their patrols and their sensor nets. We will get in and out before they even know we are there. And we will leave another message from the archives on Vor's tomb. We will show the galaxy that their saints are our demons, that their sacred ground is built upon our graves, and we will prove that nowhere is safe from us. The audacity of the plan was breathtaking. It was a direct challenge, a spit in the face of the entire Xylos Compact. It was an act that could either shatter their enemies' morale or unite them in a furious, unstoppable wave of vengeance. Maeve studied Elias for a long, silent moment, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. Prepare your team, Commander. Show them the long reach of the dead. The prototype Nexus calibrator was a monstrous thing. A web of crystalline conduits and humming power relays bolted into the Wraith's engine room. Cypher treated it with the reverence of a priest attending a volatile god. The calculations have to be perfect, he explained to Elias and the mission team, Lena, Jax, and Ronan. The Nexus isn't just a tunnel. It's a controlled fold in space-time. We're not opening our own gateway. We're piggybacking on theirs, slipping through the cracks between their scheduled transits. If our energy signature is off by even a fraction of a percent, the network's automated defenses will either crush us into a singularity or eject us into the empty void between galaxies. Ronan, the pilot, stared at the swirling energy matrix on his display. So, no pressure then. The mission was simple in its objective, infinitely complex in its execution. They would make a series of short, unscheduled Nexus jumps, a technique no one in the galaxy thought possible, to appear in the shadow of Xylos Prime's memorial moon, Cygnus X1. They would land, infiltrate the tomb, leave their message, and be gone before the moon completed its next orbital rotation. As the Wraith slipped out of Terminus, a new and terrifying sensation filled the small ship. The Nexus calibrator spooled up, emitting a low, keening hum that vibrated in their bones. Engaging, Cypher said, his voice tight. The stars outside the viewport did not streak or blur. They twisted. The fabric of space itself seemed to warp, pulling and stretching as if being drawn through an invisible aperture. A tunnel of iridescent, impossible colors opened before them, and Ronan, his knuckles white on the controls, plunged the Wraith inside. The journey was disorienting, a nauseating lurch through a dimension where physics was merely a suggestion. It lasted only 37 seconds. When they emerged, the placid, marbled sphere of Cygnus X1 hung before them, its parent planet, the jewel of the Xylos Compact, a breathtaking swirl of blue and white in the distance. They were deep in the heart of enemy territory. The memorial moon was a masterpiece of serene, sterile beauty. Its surface was covered in perfectly manicured gardens and white marble plazas. At its pole stood the grand sepulchre of Ambassador Vor, a towering spire of polished obsidian that drank the light of the nearby star. It was a place of pilgrimage, a symbol of Xylon peace and prosperity. The Wraith landed silently in a deep service canyon on the moon's dark side. Elias, Lena, and Jax disembarked, their black armor absorbing the faint starlight. They moved with practiced efficiency, using grav dampeners to glide over the marble walkways, Unseen by the automated sensor drones that patrolled the gardens, the entrance to the sepulchre was sealed by a massive stone door. But Lena, using a frequency disruptor reverse-engineered from the Stardust Drifter, convinced the door's locking mechanism that it was merely undergoing a routine diagnostic. The stone slid open with a whisper. Inside, the air was cold and still. A single beam of light from the apex of the spire illuminated the sarcophagus of Ambassador Vor, a solid block of crystal suspended in a magnetic field. It was here, in this silent, sacred place, that they would deliver their second scream. Jax placed a small, holographic projector at the base of the sarcophagus. Elias keyed a data slate, and a new file from the archives was uploaded. It was Vor's personal log, a recording he never intended anyone to hear, where he detailed the scientific necessity of capturing the last human children from the Luna evacuation for live vivisection to study their unique genetic tenacity. The audio would begin playing on a loop the moment they left. Then, Elias unslung his rifle. He didn't fire it. He used the butt of the weapon to smash the crystal sarcophagus. A web of cracks spread across its pristine surface, a spiderweb of sacrilege. It was a raw, visceral act of desecration. They did not linger. They were ghosts, and they faded back into the shadows as silently as they had come. Aboard the Retribution, Grand Inquisitor Thrax was studying a stellar cartography map when the alert came in. It was flagged with the highest possible priority. For a moment, he thought his search had borne fruit, but the report was not from his deep space sensor teams. It was from Xylos Prime. He listened, his stony face betraying no emotion, as the hysterical voice of the head of the Xylan Honor Guard reported the desecration of the sepulchre, the smashed sarcophagus, and the horrifying audio log that was now being broadcast on a closed loop to the entire moon. Thrax cut the connection. He turned back to the main star chart, a new Jurso, cold light in his eyes. He looked at the vast, empty quadrants he had ordered his teams to search. He had been looking for a pin drop in the darkness. He had been wrong. He brought up a schematic of the Nexus network, overlaying it on the star chart. His finger traced a line from the general area of the initial ghost broadcast to the system of Xylos Prime. A direct conventional flight would have taken weeks and would have been detected a dozen times over. The attack had happened less than an hour ago. There was only one explanation. He finally understood. His enemy was not a ghost hiding in a single tomb. It was a phantom that had learned to walk through walls. "Forget the thermal echoes," he commanded, his voice like the grinding of tectonic plates. "All ships, begin scanning the Nexus network. I want every unscheduled energy fluctuation, every microsecond transit that doesn't match official fleet logs. Our enemy is not hiding in the void. They are moving through the veins of the galaxy. They have our technology. They are inside our house." The hunt had just become infinitely more complex and infinitely more personal. Thrax was no longer hunting a memory. He was hunting a rival, and he would tear the entire Nexus apart, node by node, until he found it. The ghost had shown its hand, and the Inquisitor now knew the rules of the game. The desecration of Vor's tomb sent a shockwave of incandescent fury through the Xylos compact. It was a violation far deeper than the ghost broadcast. It was a physical act of sacrilege against their most revered icon. The looped recording of Vor's clinical discussion of vivisecting human children was a poison dart to the heart of their sanitized history, turning a saint into a monster overnight. The Compact, a society built on logic and emotional suppression, found itself reeling from a very human emotion rage. Public demonstrations erupted on Xylos Prime for the first time in a century. The lore-vassal unity, while publicly offering condolences, privately saw an opportunity. Their ambassador to the Compact formally suggested that the Xylans' internal security had been regrettably lax, a diplomatic barb that further frayed the already strained alliance. Elias and his team, observing the fallout from the safety of Terminus, knew they had crossed a new threshold. They had not just angered a government, they had wounded the pride of an entire species. The response would not be clinical, it would be biblical. Grand Inquisitor Thrax capitalized on the outrage. He now had the full, unbridled support of the Xylan military and a blank check from the High Council. His theory about the Nexus was no longer a fringe idea. It was the only logical explanation. He transformed the Inquisition from a search party into a system-wide dragnet. He ordered the installation of quantum entanglement scanners at every major Nexus hub, devices capable of detecting the most minute, unauthorized energy signatures. He rerouted commercial traffic, turning the Galactic superhighway into a series of heavily armed checkpoints. The galaxy, for the first time, began to feel the constriction of martial law. Thrax was turning their greatest asset into a cage. On Terminus, Cypher worked frantically, his fingers a blur over the holographic interface of the captured Nexus drive. "They're adapting," he reported to the Elder Council, his voice strained with exhaustion. "Thrax isn't a fool. He's locking down the network. Every time we piggyback on a transit, we leave a quantum echo. It's infinitesimal, but with these new scanners, it's enough. If we make another jump, they won't just detect us. They'll be able to triangulate our exit point in real time." The walls are closing in. Elias stood before the council, a new and far more dangerous plan forming in his mind. "Then we stop moving like ghosts. We have spent our lives hiding in the dark. It's time to step into the light." Thrax thinks he is hunting a single ship, a small band of terrorists. We need to show him he is hunting an army. We need to give him more targets than he can possibly handle. Kalen looked aghast. "An army we are 90,000 souls, armed with reverse-engineered technology. You want to declare open war?" "No," Elias countered, his voice steady and cold. "I want to start a brush fire. The Ghost broadcast and the Tomb desecration have not just angered our enemies, they have inspired others. According to the data we pulled from the Stardust Drifter, there are dozens of independent colonies in the fringe systems worlds populated by political exiles, minor species subjugated by the Compact, and descendants of factions that lost wars centuries ago. They have no love for the current regime. They are scattered, disorganized, and afraid. We will give them a banner to rally under. We will give them hope." His plan was radical. Using the last vestiges of their untraceable communication methods, they would broadcast schematics simplified, ruggedized versions of their own weapon designs, their shield modulators, and, most importantly, a crude but functional version of the Nexus piggybacking technology. They would send it not to governments or armies, but to the dispossessed, the forgotten, the angry. "We will arm the resentful," Elias declared. "We will give them the means to fight back. We will turn the fringe into 1,000 points of rebellion." Thrax and his Inquisition will be so busy stamping out fires on the periphery that they won't have time to look for the source of the spark. It was a strategy of unprecedented risk. They would be surrendering their technological advantage, gambling that the chaos they unleashed would shield them more effectively than stealth ever could. Maeve saw the terrible genius in it. It was a human strategy to its core. If you can't win the game, change the rules. She looked around the council chamber at the faces of the last humans in the universe. We were once a species that inspired others to reach for the stars, she said, her voice a low, somber whisper. Now, we will inspire them to burn down the thrones of those who cast us out. So be it. Release the data. The Phoenix Protocols, as the data packets were codenamed, spread through the Fringe's encrypted networks like a mimetic virus. To the miners of Cygnus X1, a gas giant where indentured laborers toiled under Lore Vassal overseers, it was a miracle. To the exiled synthetics of the android uprising, hiding in the nebulae of the Ghosthead cluster, it was a call to arms. To the grizzled smugglers and pirates who prowled the unclaimed territories, it was a business opportunity of a lifetime. Suddenly, ragtag militias and forgotten colonies began retrofitting their freighters with makeshift Nexus drives. They armed their mining vessels with Terran-designed plasma cannons. The Fringe, once a lawless but manageable frontier, began to boil. Small, coordinated strikes hit Lorvasal fuel depots. Xylan corporate listening posts in the outer systems went silent. A cargo hauler, retrofitted with a Terran shield modulator, single-handedly disabled a Xylan customs patrol and vanished into the Nexus. The attacks were small, almost insignificant on their own, but they were everywhere. Thrax, who had been meticulously tightening his noose around a single phantom, now found himself facing a Hydra. For every rebel ship he destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear. His Inquisition fleet, designed for surgical strikes, was forced to spread itself thin, responding to dozens of simultaneous, low-level threats across a vast expanse of space. The hunt for the original Ghost was derailed, bogged down in a guerrilla war of 1,000 cuts. The Grand Inquisitor was furious. He stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching a tactical display that was now a chaotic swarm of red alerts. "They are arming the rabble," he snarled. "This is an act of desperation. They are trying to hide in a storm of their own making." His Xylan analyst approached cautiously. "Grand Inquisitor, our intelligence suggests these disparate groups are beginning to communicate. They are coalescing around a single symbol, the Terran sigil. They call themselves the Children of the Phoenix. And they believe the humans have returned not as conquerors, but as liberators." Thrax's fist clenched. The Ghost had done something he had never anticipated. It had turned its own myth into a weapon. It had started a revolution. "Then we will give them a martyr," Thrax declared, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. He turned to his fleet master. "We are focusing our resources. Find me the largest concentration of these children. Find their primary base of operations. We will make an example of them. We will burn their world so brightly that its light will serve as a warning to anyone else who would dare to fly that cursed sigil. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who follow ghosts." The target Thrax chose was a rogue moon called Haven, a barren rock in the Kepler's Remorse system that had become the de facto headquarters for the burgeoning rebellion. It was a hive of scum and villainy, a fortress built from salvaged freighters and hollowed-out asteroids, teeming with thousands of newly emboldened fighters from a dozen different species. It was the heart of the brushfire, and Thrax was coming to extinguish it with an ocean of force. On Terminus, Elias watched the Inquisition fleet converge on Haven with a cold knot in his stomach. He had started this fire, and now he was about to watch the first of his converts be burned alive. The rebellion was too young, too disorganized to stand against the full might of the Inquisition. "They will be slaughtered," Kalen said, his voice a broken whisper. "Their blood is on your hands." Elias's face was grim. They chose to fight. That choice was their own. But they will not die for nothing. He turned to Maeve, his eyes blazing with a desperate, terrible resolve. Thrax has made a mistake. He has gathered his entire fleet in one place. He believes we are hiding. He thinks we are cowards who let others fight our battles. We are going to prove him wrong. We are going to Haven. The council chamber erupted in chaos. "Go to Haven with what, the Wraith?" Kalen shrieked. "No," Elias said, his voice cutting through the noise. He brought up a new schematic on the central display. It was a design that had been dormant in the archives for over 300 years, a relic of a war that was lost before it could even be deployed. The design was for a single, massive weapon, a ship that was more engine and cannon than hull. "The lore vassal believe in overwhelming force," Elias said. "The Xylans believe in surgical precision. We were human. We believed in shock and awe." He pointed to the schematic. "We are going to build the Vengeance." It was a suicide mission, a final, desperate gambit. They would strip Terminus of every non-essential system, every spare power conduit, every weapon plate, to construct a warship designed for a single, glorious battle. They would reveal themselves, their home, their very existence, to save the rebellion they had created. They would trade their sanctuary for a chance to face their hunter on their own terms. Maeve looked at the schematic, then at Elias's unwavering face. The cycle of hiding was over. The cycle of running was over. The ghost was about to become flesh, and the galaxy was about to witness the terrible, beautiful fury of a species that had been pushed to the edge of extinction and had decided, as one, to push back. "Begin construction," she commanded, "and may our ancestors forgive us for the hell we are about to unleash." The construction of the Vengeance was the sound of a world dying to give birth to a god of war. Terminus, the sanctuary that had cradled the last of humanity for 3 centuries, was cannibalized. Entire residential tiers, their lights extinguished forever, were stripped of their hull plating. The hydroponic farms, which had fed generations, had their power conduits ripped out to feed the monstrous engines of the new ship. The city grew dark and cold as the vessel in the central cavern grew, a skeletal titan being fleshed out with the bones of its own home. It was not a ship of elegant lines or subtle design. It was a brutalist statement of purpose, an engine with a cannon attached, forged from salvaged alien tech and human desperation. 90,000 souls worked in a silent, desperate frenzy, their faces grim in the flickering work lights. They were not just building a warship, they were building a pyre for their old life of hiding, and a phoenix to rise from its ashes. When it was finished, the Vengeance hung in the cavern, a jagged arrowhead of matte black armor that seemed to absorb the very light around it. It bore only one marking, painted in stark white on its prow, the ancient sigil of the Terran High Command. Elias stood on the gantry, looking at the assembled crew, the best of the Nightfall Corps, the most brilliant of the engineers, all volunteers for a mission from which none expected to return. He turned for a final look at Elder Maeve, who stood on the command spire, a small, frail figure against the backdrop of their dwindling city. Over the comms, her voice was a fragile whisper, yet it carried across the cavern. For 300 years, we were the keepers of an ending, Elias. Now, you must be the author of a beginning. Go with the fury of all who are lost. Go, and make them remember our name. Elias raised a single, clenched fist in salute. We are not a memory anymore, Elder, he broadcast back. We are a promise, the great cavern doors, sealed for a lifetime, groaned open, revealing the star-dusted void. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the asteroid, the Vengeance ignited its engines, a sun born in the heart of a tomb, and launched into the darkness, leaving a dying world in its wake. The Battle of Haven had already begun. Thrax's Inquisition fleet, a precise and overwhelming formation of nearly 50 warships, had established a blockade around the rogue moon, subjecting it to a methodical, merciless bombardment. The makeshift fleet of the Children of the Phoenix fought back with a courage born of desperation, their retrofitted freighters and mining ships darting between the colossal Lorvassal cruisers, their Terran-designed weapons inflicting small but galling wounds. But it was a battle of attrition they could not win. For every Inquisition vessel they damaged, 3 of their own were blasted into incandescent clouds of gas and debris. On the bridge of the Retribution, Thrax watched the slaughter with cold satisfaction. This was order restoring itself. This was the inevitable consequence of defying the established powers. He was not just destroying a rebel base, he was cauterizing a wound on the galaxy. Then, reality broke. It did not tear or bend, it shattered. Directly in the center of his perfect formation, a rift of impossible, kaleidoscopic energy ripped open. It was not the clean, surgical incision of a standard Nexus transit. It was a violent, jagged wound in space-time. From this wound emerged the Vengeance. It was larger than any cruiser, its angular, brutalist design a stark contrast to the ships of the Compact and the Unity. It was a phantom made real, a ghost clad in iron and fire. Thrax stared, for the first time in his life, feeling not logic or strategy, but a primal, instinctual shock. Before any of his ships could react, the Vengeance fired its primary weapon. They had called it the Rift Cannon. It did not shoot a beam of energy or a projectile. It fired a targeted singularity, a pinpoint distortion of space-time that collapsed upon its target. The lead Xylan battlecruiser, the Elegant Blade, was hit amidships. It did not explode. It folded. The front and back of the massive vessel bent inward as if crushed by an invisible god, its structure imploding in a silent, horrifying display of gravitational violence before vanishing into a brief flash of light. The effect on both fleets was instantaneous. The rebels, who had been on the verge of annihilation, let out a unified roar of disbelief and renewed hope over their comm channels. The Inquisition fleet faltered, their perfect formation disrupted by the impossible arrival and the even more impossible weapon. Elias's voice, amplified and broadcast across all channels, cut through the chaos. This is Commander Elias of the Terran warship Vengeance. You are trespassing. Leave now, or be erased. Thrax recovered instantly, his shock replaced by the cold fury of a predator whose prey had dared to fight back. All ships, converge and fire, destroy that vessel. The Inquisition fleet obeyed. unleashing a torrent of plasma, laser, and kinetic fire that converged on the Vengeance. But the human ship was already moving. It did not maneuver like a traditional warship. It used short, microsecond nexus jumps, vanishing from one position and reappearing in another a heartbeat later, leaving the Inquisition's targeting computers screaming in confusion. It was a ghost dancing through a hailstorm, its own cannons firing with methodical precision. Each shot a calculated strike against a critical system, a shield generator here, an engine block there. The battle became a maelstrom. The children of the Phoenix, inspired by the Vengeance's impossible intervention, surged forward, their smaller ships swarming the distracted Inquisition cruisers. Elias ignored the smaller ships. He had only one target. The Vengeance executed a final, daring nexus jump, reappearing directly above the Retribution, so close their hulls almost touched. For a moment, the two commanders stared at each other across the void. Two ideologies made manifest in steel. Thrax ordered his point defense cannons to fire, but it was too late. Elias fired the Rift cannon one last time. The singularity struck the Retribution's bridge. The armored viewport cracked, then imploded, sucking the command crew into the void. The ship's systems died. Its lights flickered out, and the mighty flagship of the Inquisition was left a powerless, drifting hulk, its commander presumed dead, its will broken. But Elias did not destroy the ship. The silence that followed was more profound than any explosion. The Inquisition fleet, leaderless, its flagship a crippled wreck, its formation shattered, hesitated. They had come expecting to slaughter rabble and found themselves facing a tactical nightmare, a legend from a history book that was not only real, but had evolved into something far more dangerous. Elias opened a channel, this time directly to the crippled bridge of the Retribution, knowing its emergency systems would still be recording. He did not know if Thrax was alive or dead, and it did not matter. You came to this system to make an example of those who fight for freedom. Elias's voice echoed through the dead ship. Instead, you have become the example. You hunted a ghost and found a species that refuses to die. We are not your past. We are your future. A future where the galaxy you built on lies and graves is held to account. Now, take this message back to your masters. The children of Earth are back, and this is only the beginning. He cut the connection. The Vengeance, its point made, turned, and unleashed a final, devastating volley at the nearest Lorvassal cruiser, breaking its spine. The signal was clear. The battle was over. Slowly, then with increasing speed, the remaining ships of the Inquisition fleet turned and fled into the Nexus, leaving their crippled flagship and their shattered pride behind. A great, ragged cheer erupted from the fleet of the Children of the Phoenix as they watched their oppressors flee. Haven was saved. The rebellion had its first true victory. 100 small ships, bearing the colors of a dozen different worlds, moved to surround the Vengeance, not as a military formation, but as a procession of honor on the bridge of his ship. Elias watched them, the cheers echoing over the comms. His crew was exhausted. The ship was damaged, and their home was a hollowed-out shell. But they had done it. They had faced the monster and made it blink. Lena came to stand beside him, her helmet off, her face streaked with grime and sweat. "What now, Elias?" she asked quietly. He looked out at the eclectic fleet before them, at the battered but defiant ships of the rebellion he had sparked. They were no longer just the 90,000 souls of Terminus. They were part of something larger now, something they had given birth to in the fires of their own vengeance. They were not just the last of humanity. They were the first of a new alliance, one forged in defiance. Now, Elias said, a faint, weary smile touching his lips for the first time. Now, we show them all how the phoenix learns to fly. He looked out at the sea of stars. No longer a void to hide in, but a galaxy waiting to be reclaimed. The ghost had finally found its voice, and its roar was the sound of a new dawn. The galaxy would never be silent again.